can't find the words. I'm trying and trying, I wait. Nothing happens. I scream inside myself instead.
I think of the marginalized narratives of women in history. That the word history is obviously something that's been male-dominated, and so in elementary schools or in high school, when we took history classes, the narratives in there were actually the narratives of American men and not so much of the woman. So when I think of her story, I think of the silence narratives of women in America and their stories.
Her life, her story. And then I never really thought about his story also being his, because I always just thought of, just history in a way, just our American culture. History
would be the idea of like language, most like there's this idea of post-modernity where language
history
genders people.
Written by man in particular, and her story, just to play on words to try and again highlight the accomplishments of women. So really trying to take that focus and say, hey, we need to make sure and include our women in the overall history.
I've never seen Her Story versus History. If I were to see that somewhere, like if it said Her Story Month, Awareness Her Story Month, and then I said Her Story, if I were to see Her Story versus History, then I would think, all right, maybe women's rights, maybe where women have been through history. But if you just show me her story, I automatically think a woman.
Herstory Month is a reclaiming of sort of like the woman's body, space in the world, and different ideas of what it means to exist beyond the male-dominant ideologies that we have.
And bell hooks. I think of one of the main Arab American feminist scholars.
Let's see, Eleanor Roosevelt, Margaret Sanger's one of my favorites. Alice Paul, Sojourner Truth.
Like Rosa Parks, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, Helen Keller,
C.J. Walker,
Susan Duraj. I think of women that are really breaking barriers and saying the things that haven't been said.
Course? Yes, 3.
Well, I'm a women's studies major. I'm double majoring in English and women's studies, so I've taken lots of women's studies classes.
I took a U.S. history, a women's history in the U.S. Taking 2 classes so far.
What made you take the courses?
A lot of it was my own ignorance, highly ignorant, and just the fact that, especially some of the fields I was looking into, there's a high dominance with the male voice.
Well, for me, as a woman of color, it was, it's a major of passion for me. Like, I feel very passionate about this topic, and in my classes, the stuff that we're learning, it's not just knowledge, it's very personal too.
Yeah, something like that. It was a service learning course where it encouraged us to get involved in activities and to embrace them, how they would empower women and how they could relate to the past, to the 60s, to women's rights, that kind of thing.
That idea of working out your own personal, maybe chauvinistic ideas about women, and exposing yourself to a litany of different ways to think about women, whether it's relationships or sort of working relationships with them. And the world is changing, so I thought it would be a great experience to work with my own chauvinistic ideas.
I thought it was important to know since I'm a woman.
Not until recently I have never heard of Her Story, and honestly I didn't know when it was or anything like that.
To be honest, no. I didn't know Women's Her Story Month.
It's a celebration of women and their contribution to the world. I know it sits right after Black
Event
History
or whatever, a time dedicated to recognizing important women in history and bringing light to their stories and their narratives
So
and
it's
their
one of those
accomplishments.
months that we try at least to all act like we have some reverence for other people other than
Women's Herstory Month
ourselves.
is an opportunity to highlight women's achievements throughout history, and it's a way to hopefully educate.
Usually thought of as a month where we all sort of have a general consensus to appreciate women in that month, and hopefully that extends beyond the month. But usually it's that month.
Awareness to the fact that that history is something that is masculine, and it has silenced the woman's story in this country and internationally as well. So I think Her Story Month is needed to bring awareness to that bias.
It's not too late for making a new world. It's not too late